They thought the cold would finish the job, push them over the ice, let the lake erase the truth. No witnesses, no noise, no mercy. But the lake did not stay silent. A rescue dog stopped where no one else would. A retired Navy SEAL looked down and saw two people who were never meant to survive. The injuries were wrong, the fear was fresh, and the trail didn't lead away from the cliff. It led deeper into something hidden. Before sunrise, one question changed everything. If this wasn't an accident, who wanted them dead? And how far were they willing to go? Lake Superior in late January was a place stripped of mercy. Along the northern Michigan shoreline, winter pressed down hard and relentless, burying the land beneath wind-packed snow and sealing the sky in a dull sheet of iron gray. The lake itself lay frozen in broken plates of ice, shifting and groaning beneath the cold, as if the water below still remembered how to move. Jack Morrison moved through that landscape with the controlled economy of a man who had learned not to waste motion. At 41, he was tall and broad-shouldered, his posture straight but relaxed, the stance of someone trained to stay balanced even when the ground betrayed him. His dark brown hair was cut short, practical and unstyled, and a thin scar traced the edge of his left cheekbone, old, faded, but permanent. His eyes were a muted steel gray, steady and watchful, carrying the quiet weight of experience rather than aggression. He wore a U.S. Army OCP camouflage jacket, the standard operational pattern worn by soldiers in the field. The fabric was thick and weathered, designed for endurance rather than appearance, its muted blend of greens and browns breaking up his outline against snow-dusted rock and frozen earth. A rectangular U.S. Army tape was stitched above the right chest pocket, while a name tape rested on the left, partially worn from years of use. The collar stood firm against the wind, and the sleeves were buttoned tight at the cuffs. Beneath it, thermal layers held in what little warmth the body could keep in a place like this. Black tactical pants and insulated combat boots completed the uniform of a man who dressed for function, not comfort. Jack did not wear rank insignia. He no longer needed to. At his side walked Ranger, an 8-year-old German shepherd whose presence felt solid and deliberate. Ranger was large even for his breed, his frame powerful but disciplined, muscles moving smoothly beneath a thick black and tan coat. His ears stood alert, rotating constantly as they tracked distant sounds carried by the wind. His amber eyes were sharp and intelligent, holding the focused calm of a working dog who had seen enough chaos to understand when silence mattered most. Ranger had served as a K-9 in combat environments before retirement, and age had slowed his joints just enough to make him careful, not hesitant. His instincts remained sharp, honed by years of training and reinforced by trust in the man beside him. They were on a winter search and rescue patrol, contracted to assist local emergency response units during the most dangerous season on Lake Superior. Jack did not think of it as heroism. It was work that required discipline, patience, and a tolerance for risk. Ranger understood that without being told. The wind shifted abruptly, cutting harder off the frozen lake. Jack adjusted the strap of his pack and took another step forward when a sound slipped through the noise of the storm, faint, irregular, easy to miss if someone was not listening for it. A soft electronic chirp. Jack stopped mid-stride. Ranger stopped with him. The dog's body went still, ears rotating forward as his head tilted slightly. His nose lifted, drawing in the air, then dropped toward the snow. Jack raised his handheld receiver and adjusted the frequency. For a moment, there was only static and wind. Then the chirp returned, weak but unmistakable. A distress beacon, not fresh, not strong, still transmitting. Jack exhaled slowly, breath fogging the cold air. Beacons did not panic. They did not exaggerate. They only meant one thing. Someone had expected to be found. "All right," Jack murmured, his voice low and controlled. Ranger moved ahead without pulling, his pace measured but intent. His paws carved clean, deliberate tracks through the snow as he followed something Jack could not see. The wind carried a faint scent upward from below, sharp and metallic. Blood. Jack recognized it instantly. They reached the edge where snow thinned and ice glazed the stone beneath. Jack dropped to one knee, anchoring himself, and Ranger crept forward, peering down over the rim. The ledge below revealed itself through drifting snow and pale reflected light. Two bodies lay there, a man and a woman, positioned too close together for coincidence, their forms stopped by a narrow shelf carved into the cliff face. The man was conscious, barely. His breathing came in shallow, uneven bursts, one arm twisted at an angle that spoke of broken bone. Blood darkened the sleeve of his jacket, frozen stiff where it had soaked through. His face was pale, lips cracked and blue, eyes open but struggling to focus. The woman beside him lay still, her dark hair fanned across the snow, stiff with frost. A thin line of blood traced from her temple, frozen where it touched the ice. Her chest rose faintly, irregularly, the smallest sign that life still clung to her. Jack's jaw tightened. Ranger reacted immediately. His hackles rose along his spine, and a sharp bark tore from his throat, echoing off the frozen cliff face. The sound carried urgency and warning, a clear signal that this was not an ordinary find. Jack placed a steady hand on Ranger's shoulder. "Easy," he said quietly. Ranger did not calm. He paced along the edge, nose working furiously, then stopped and released a strained whine, thin and tight. Jack had heard that sound before, years ago, in places where survival balanced on minutes. Alive, but fading fast. Then Ranger froze. His head snapped toward the tree line behind them, his ears flattened slightly, body going rigid, every muscle coiled. He did not bark. He listened. Jack followed his gaze. The forest stood silent, snow-laden pines unmoving, their branches heavy with ice. No clear tracks were visible from where Jack knelt, but Ranger's posture told him enough. Someone had been here recently, someone close enough to leave scent, someone who had walked away. "This isn't right," Jack said softly. Accidents left chaos, scrambled paths, panic marks, signs of struggle. This scene felt contained, controlled. The ledge below was not a place people reached by chance. Jack keyed his radio. "Search and Rescue Unit Morrison. I have 2 injured persons located below the North Cliff line. Severe trauma, possible hypothermia. Beacon signal confirmed." Static crackled before a response came through, distorted by terrain and weather. "Copy, Morrison. Nearest support is at least 20 minutes out." Jack looked down again. 20 minutes in this cold was not time. It was a margin for loss. Ranger whined again, softer now, eyes fixed on the woman below. Jack nodded once. "We're going down." He secured his rope with methodical care, anchoring it to solid stone, testing the line twice. Ranger sat when commanded, disciplined despite the tension running through his body. "Stay. Guard," Jack said. Ranger obeyed, but his eyes never left Jack's face. Jack swung his legs over the edge and began the descent. Ice glazed the rock beneath his boots, and the wind cut sharper the lower he went. His shoulder protested as he controlled the rope, a familiar ache from old damage, but he ignored it. Pain was information. Nothing more. The ledge rose to meet him faster than expected. Jack landed hard, knees bending to absorb the impact, and moved immediately toward the man. "Hey," Jack said, crouching beside him. "Can you hear me?" The man's eyes focused slowly. With effort, he raised his good hand and made 3 short, deliberate motions. Survivors. Need help. Danger nearby. Jack's gaze flicked upward toward the cliff edge, then toward the tree line Ranger had been watching. "Yeah," Jack said quietly. "I know." He turned to the woman and pressed 2 fingers gently to her neck. A pulse fluttered beneath his touch, weak, uneven, but present. Relief came sharp and brief, immediately replaced by urgency. Above them, Ranger barked again, short, sharp, the sound of warning, not fear. Jack looked up at the frozen world above the ledge, at the snow, the trees, and the silence that hid more than it revealed. This was not a rescue gone wrong. This was an attempt to erase something, and someone had expected it to work. The wind off Lake Superior cut sharper as the rescue line tightened, and Jack Morrison guided the injured man upward, inch by careful inch. Ice scraped against rope fibers, and the cliff face creaked softly beneath shifting snow. Above them, Ranger held his position at the edge, body low, eyes fixed on the tree line, every instinct tuned outward. Jack did not rush. Rushing made mistakes, and mistakes killed people. When the man reached the top, Jack hauled him over the edge with controlled force and rolled him onto stable ground, immediately wrapping him in an emergency blanket to trap what little heat remained. The woman followed more slowly. Jack kept one hand steady on the rope, the other braced against the ice, his breath controlled, ignoring the burn in his shoulder. When she was finally up, Ranger moved closer, careful and quiet, lowering his head to sniff her face and hands. He made a soft, reassuring sound deep in his chest, not trained, not commanded, just instinct. The woman stirred faintly at the contact, a reflex more than consciousness. The man coughed, a wet, painful sound. Jack crouched beside him, assessing quickly. The man appeared to be in his late 30s, broad-shouldered despite the cold thinning his frame, dark hair matted with blood and snow. His eyes were sharp beneath the pain, alert in a way Jack recognized immediately. This was someone trained to notice details, someone who did not panic easily. Shock had dulled him, but it had not broken him. "Stay with me," Jack said evenly. "Help is on the way." The man swallowed, nodded once. "They thought we'd freeze," he said, voice rough, breath tearing at his chest. "Didn't wait to check?" Jack glanced toward the trees again. Ranger had shifted slightly, angling his body to block the approach from the forest while still keeping the injured pair within sight. Snow continued to fall, light but steady, erasing tracks even as it created them. "Who's they?" Jack asked. The man closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again with effort. "People who didn't want us talking," he said. "We were following shipping records, cold freight routes, stuff that doesn't show up where it should." Jack felt something settle into place, heavy and unwelcome. Accidents did not erase shipping records. People did. The woman let out a faint sound, barely more than breath. Jack turned to her, checking her pulse again. Still there. Weak. Ranger watched closely, ears angled forward, as if memorizing the rhythm of her breathing. "She's my partner," the man said, forcing the words through clenched teeth. "Name's Sarah Carter." Jack looked at her more closely now. Sarah Carter appeared to be in her early 30s, slender but strong, the kind of build shaped more by endurance than appearance. Her dark hair was pulled back into a practical knot, strands frozen loose around her face. Even unconscious, there was a set to her jaw that suggested stubbornness, a refusal to yield easily. A thin cut along her temple had bled freely before freezing, but the injury looked cleaner than Jack had first feared. "What were you investigating?" Jack asked, keeping his voice calm. The man drew in a shaky breath. "Cold transport companies, ships and trucks that move frozen goods across the lake and through ports along the shore. On paper, it's all food, medical supplies, industrial material. In reality—" He stopped, coughing again, blood flecking his lips. Jack waited. "In reality, people disappear along those routes," the man continued. "No reports, no witnesses, just gaps." Jack felt Ranger shift closer to the man, the dog's nose working the air around him, then lifting again toward the forest. The dog's posture changed subtly, tension increasing, not because of the injured humans, but because of something else, something unseen. "They pushed us," the man said, "right off the edge. Didn't say a word. just hands on our backs. Knew exactly where we'd be standing. Jack's eyes narrowed. Someone gave them your location. The man nodded once. Someone inside, he said. Has to be. They knew our timeline, our route, even the spot where the trail narrows near the cliff. This wasn't random. The radio crackled softly at Jack's shoulder, a reminder that help was still minutes away. Minutes that stretched thin in weather like this. "What's your name?" Jack asked. "Michael Reed," the man said. "Analyst?" "I don't run field ops." "Not usually." Jack absorbed that. An analyst did not end up on a frozen cliff by coincidence. Michael Reed shifted slightly, pain flashing across his face. "Listen," he said, urgency sharpening his tone. "Whatever we found, it's bigger than one company, bigger than one port. There are patterns, financial transfers that don't match cargo. Ships registered under one name, insured under another. Someone's cleaning the paper trail." Jack's jaw tightened. He had heard versions of this before, in different places, with different names. The shape of it never changed. Sarah stirred again, her eyelids fluttering. Ranger lowered his head closer to her face, breathing slowly, deliberately. Her hand twitched, fingers brushing the thick fur at his neck. Her breathing steadied slightly, as if responding to the warmth. "She's tough," Michael said, a hint of pride breaking through the pain. "Doesn't quit." Jack nodded. "She's alive," he said. "That's what matters right now." Michael's gaze fixed on Jack's uniform then, on the OCP camouflage jacket, the faded name tape, the unmarked collar. "You military?" he asked. "Was," Jack said. That was enough. Michael did not press. Above them, Ranger let out a low warning sound, not loud enough to carry far, but unmistakable. His head snapped toward the trees again. Jack followed his line of sight and saw what Ranger had smelled earlier, now made visible by disturbance in the snow. Tracks, fresh, partially obscured by falling flakes, but still there if you knew how to look. Someone had moved quickly, recently. "They didn't wait around," Michael said, following Jack's gaze. "But they'll notice when we don't disappear." Jack stood slowly, scanning the area with renewed focus. This place was no longer just a rescue site. It was a message that had failed to deliver. "Rescue team's close," Jack said. "When they get here, you tell them exactly what you told me. No shortcuts." Michael nodded, then hesitated. "They might not all be clean," he said quietly. Jack met his eyes. "I know." Sarah's eyes opened then, just briefly. They were dark, sharp even through pain, fixing on Jack's face with sudden clarity. "They pushed us," she whispered. "Didn't want witnesses." Jack leaned closer. "You're safe for now," he said. "For now," she repeated faintly, as if testing the words. Ranger shifted, positioning himself between Sarah and the open space beyond them. Snow continued to fall, softening the world, hiding evidence even as it revealed intent to those who knew where to look. Jack straightened, the weight of the situation settling fully into place. Saving these two had been necessary. It had also been the first move in something that would not end quickly. This cliff was not the end of the story. It was where someone had tried to end it, and failed. The sound of rotors cut through the snowfall before the helicopter came into view, its searchlight sweeping across the shoreline in slow arcs. Jack Morrison stood a few steps back from the injured pair, arms folded against the cold, watching how Ranger tracked every movement of the machine without alarm. When the aircraft settled onto the ice-scarred ground, medics moved quickly and without drama, their efficiency born from repetition. Jack answered questions briefly, precisely, letting the professionals take over while keeping his eyes on the tree line where fresh snow continued to bury tracks that mattered. She arrived minutes later in a dark SUV that stopped short of the landing zone, headlights cutting off as soon as the engine died. The woman who stepped out moved with purpose, not urgency, tall and slender beneath a long charcoal winter coat that hung straight against her frame. Emily Carter was in her mid-30s, with dark auburn hair pulled back tightly at the nape of her neck and sharp hazel eyes that missed little. She wore no visible jewelry, no unnecessary color, her clothes practical and understated. Her face held a controlled seriousness that suggested long hours and limited patience for distractions. Years earlier, a failed operation had cost her a colleague she trusted, and since then she had learned to measure people carefully before offering belief. Emily approached the scene slowly, taking in details before speaking. She noted the rope anchor points, the controlled perimeter Jack had set, the way Ranger positioned himself between the injured and open space without command. She saw discipline, not improvisation. "You, Morrison," she said finally, voice even, badge already visible in her gloved hand. Jack nodded once. "Jack Morrison." She glanced at his jacket, the U.S. Army tape worn but clear, then at his unmarked collar. "Former military," she said, not a question. "Former," Jack replied. Emily crouched near the injured man, listening as medics worked, then stood and faced Jack again. "I'm Special Agent Emily Carter, FBI." Her tone carried neither authority nor challenge, only fact. "These two were assigned to my unit." Jack did not react outwardly. "They said as much." Emily studied him for a moment longer. She had learned not to trust first impressions, but she also knew when something felt wrong in a way that deserved attention. "You secured the area," she said. "Most civilians don't think to do that." "I'm not most civilians." "No," she agreed. "You're not." They stepped aside as the stretcher was lifted toward the helicopter. Ranger followed with his eyes, then returned his focus to Emily, head slightly tilted, assessing her. She noticed and did not flinch. "That dog," she said. "K9. "Ranger," Jack said. "Retired." Emily nodded. "He didn't act retired. He never really learned how." The helicopter lifted off, its sound fading into the snow-heavy sky. For a moment the shoreline felt emptier, quieter, as if the place itself exhaled. Emily turned back to Jack. "What did Michael Reed tell you?" she asked. "That they were investigating cold freight routes," Jack said, "and that someone knew where they'd be." Emily's jaw tightened slightly. "We've been tracking a network tied to refrigerated transport for 8 months," she said. "Ships, trucks, storage facilities. Everything looks clean on paper. It isn't." Jack listened, saying nothing. "People disappear along those routes," Emily continued. "Migrant workers, runaways, anyone without a loud enough voice. We follow a lead, it vanishes. A witness backs out. Evidence gets misfiled." She paused. "Or someone tips off the wrong people." Jack met her gaze. "You think it's internal?" "I know it is," Emily said. "I just don't know how high." The wind shifted again, snow brushing across their boots. Ranger moved closer to Jack, his presence steady. Emily watched the dog for a second. "You trained him yourself?" "Yes," she nodded once. "Figures?" They walked a short distance away from the landing zone, where the noise had not yet disturbed the snow. Emily knelt, brushing aside powder with her glove until faint impressions appeared. Not footprints, not clearly, but disturbances where someone had moved quickly and tried not to be noticed. "They came and went fast," she said. "Knew the terrain." Jack crouched beside her. "And knew your people's schedule." Emily straightened, breath fogging the air. "Michael's an analyst," she said. "Sarah's the field one. She pushes. She doesn't let things go. That's why she's still breathing." Jack glanced toward the dark water beyond the ice. "Pushing gets attention." Emily gave a humorless smile. "It always has." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken conclusions settling between them. Emily broke it first. "I don't trust easily," she said, "especially people who show up where things go wrong." "That's healthy," Jack said. "But you didn't contaminate the site," she continued. "You didn't ask questions you didn't need answers to. And your dog spotted something my team missed." Ranger lifted his head at the mention of himself, ears flicking. Emily looked at Jack again. "So I'm listening," she said. "Not trusting. Listening?" "That's enough," Jack replied. She reached into her coat and pulled out a slim notebook, pages worn, corners bent. "We're not ready to move openly," she said. "Too many eyes, too many doors that close when we knock." She hesitated, then added, "If you're willing, I could use someone who knows how to stay quiet." Jack considered her words. He had not come here looking for this. He had come to work, to keep his world small and controlled. But the image of two bodies on a frozen ledge returned uninvited. "I don't work for the Bureau," he said. "I'm not asking you to," Emily replied. "I'm asking you not to walk away." Ranger let out a low sound, almost a sigh, as if agreeing. Emily noticed. "He always vote like that?" she asked. "Only when he thinks I'm lying to myself," Jack said. A faint smile touched her face, gone as quickly as it appeared. "Figures?" Snow continued to fall, light but relentless, covering evidence even as it marked new ground. Emily closed her notebook. "I'll be in touch," she said. "If what Michael told you is accurate, this won't stay quiet for long." Jack nodded. "I know." She turned back toward her vehicle, stopping once to look over her shoulder. "For what it's worth," she said. "Thank you. They'd be dead without you." Jack did not answer. He watched as she drove away, headlights disappearing into the gray. Ranger sat beside him, calm again, as if the decision had already been made. This was no longer just a rescue site, it was an opening. And Emily Carter was the first person who had chosen not to close it. The storm eased by morning, leaving the shoreline washed clean in pale light and brittle silence. Jack Morrison drove the narrow road that traced Lake Superior's edge, the truck heater humming low, while Ranger sat upright in the passenger seat, nose pressed close to the cracked window. The cold carried information here. Jack had learned that years ago. Ranger learned it every second. Their track ran along the working face of the lake now, away from the cliff and into places where steel met water and cold kept secrets well. They stopped first at the outer harbor, a spread of concrete docks and rusted bollards half buried by snow. The port had once been busy before shipping patterns changed and contracts moved south. Now it lived in fragments. A few lights, a few trucks, a few men who worked without asking questions because asking questions cost jobs. Jack stepped out, the U.S. Army OCP jacket breaking up his outline against ice-stained walls. He moved slowly, not hiding, not advertising, just another man with a dog near the water. Ranger's paws left precise prints as he followed, head low, tail steady, eyes alert. Inside the first cold storage warehouse, the air bit harder. Frost clung to steel beams, and the concrete floor carried the dull sheen of constant refrigeration. Jack noted the cameras, the locks, the way pallets were stacked with room to move quickly if needed. This place was legal on paper. That did not mean it was clean. Ranger paused near a loading bay, sniffed, then moved on. Nothing here held his attention long. Jack filed it away and kept moving. By mid-morning they reached the second site, smaller and older, with a single rail spur running into the back. The doors were shut, but the smell lingered. Ranger slowed immediately, nostrils flaring, breath fogging as he drew in the air. Jack watched the dog's posture change. This was not alarm. It was recognition. Ranger circled once, then twice, stopping near a dented steel container set apart from the others. His tail stilled, his ears angled forward. He let out a soft, low sound from his chest. Jack rested a hand against the cold metal. The container had been moved recently. Tracks were faint but present, disturbed snow pressed down by boots and wheels. Jack did not open it. He did not need to. Ranger already had what mattered. Across town, Emily Carter worked a different angle. She sat in a borrowed office with bare walls and a single desk, her coat folded neatly over the chair behind her. Emily preferred clean lines and clear thinking. She wore a dark sweater and pressed slacks, her auburn hair pulled back tight, her posture straight, even when seated. The habit came from years of field work where slouching meant missing something. She had learned caution the hard way after trusting a supervisor once who turned out to be selling information for favors. Since then, she checked everything twice and trusted nothing fully. Emily spread bank statements across the desk, aligning dates with shipping manifests and vessel logs. On paper, the routes made sense. On screen, they didn't. Transfers moved through shell companies tied to cold freight operations that serviced the lake. Insurance policies overlapped in strange ways. Ships appeared in one system and vanished in another. Emily traced lines with a pen, building a quiet map of inconsistencies. One name surfaced twice, then a third time, always near the edges of legitimate operations. Lucas Hale, 23, dock worker, temporary contracts, no criminal record, no financial footprint worth noticing. He had filed internal safety complaints 6 weeks earlier asking why certain containers were sealed differently, why some shipments bypassed standard checks. 2 weeks later, he stopped showing up for work. Officially, he quit. Unofficially, no one had heard from him since. Emily leaned back, eyes closing briefly as she considered the shape of it. Young workers disappeared all the time, usually for reasons that did not reach her desk. This one had. She picked up her phone and dialed Jack. Jack answered on the second ring, voice low. "We've got something," he said before she spoke. "Lucas Hale," Emily replied. "You seeing that name anywhere near your side of the lake?" Ranger lifted his head, ears pricking. "Yeah," Jack said. "Just did." They met that afternoon at a small marina tucked between rock outcrops and frozen reeds. The place was quiet, owned by a man who had stopped repairing boats years ago but kept the lights on out of habit. Jack stood near the water, Ranger beside him, as Emily approached on foot. She took in Ranger first, then Jack, then the empty slips and the gray horizon beyond. "Tell me what you found," she said. Jack led her to the container site, stopping short of the building. "We didn't open it," he said. "Didn't need to." Ranger stepped forward, nose hovering inches above the snow, then lifted his head toward Emily. He sniffed the air around her briefly, polite and uninterested, then returned to the container. He sat. The decision was deliberate. Emily's eyes narrowed. "He knows this scent." "He recognizes it," Jack said. "Not fear, not blood. Familiar." Emily considered that. "Lucas worked here," she said. "Seasonal. He fed stray cats on his breaks. Talked to anyone who'd listen." Jack glanced toward a cluster of stacked crates near the fence. A small gray cat darted out, thin but healthy, tail high despite the cold. Ranger watched without moving, no interest in the animal itself. "That cat's been here a while," Jack said. Emily nodded. "Lucas named her Harbor. She slept in his locker during night shifts. People noticed when he stopped showing up. No one followed up." Ranger stood then, paced once, and returned to sit by the container again, his gaze fixed, unwavering. Emily exhaled slowly. "So Lucas didn't disappear quietly?" "No," Jack said. "He disappeared because he asked the wrong questions." Emily looked at the snow, at the faint marks already filling in. "2 tracks," she said. "Yours and mine." Jack nodded. "Parallel." They stood there as the light faded, the lake darkening beyond the ice. The investigation had split without ceremony. Jack and Ranger would keep walking docks and cold rooms, following scent and silence. Emily would keep pulling paper threads until they either broke or led somewhere no one wanted them to go. Neither path was safe, both were necessary. And somewhere between steel containers and spreadsheets, Lucas Hale waited to be found. Night dropped hard over Lake Superior, dragging the temperature down with it. Jack Morrison killed the engine a quarter-mile from the old pier and let the silence settle. Ranger shifted forward, already alert, breath fogging the cracked window. The cold carried sound cleanly tonight. It also carried truth. They moved fast, no talking. Ranger led, paws light on frozen concrete, head low, tail steady. The pier was supposed to be dead, condemned, forgotten. But Jack saw the signs immediately. Fresh tire marks half buried by drifting snow. A security light that shouldn't still have power. Emily Carter noticed them too, her stride tightening, her focus narrowing as the field replaced theory. The first warehouse loomed out of the dark, squat and steel-skinned. Jack cut the chain. Ranger slipped inside. The air hit like a blade. Dry, mechanical cold layered over something human. Ranger slowed, nostrils flaring, then pushed deeper. Jack followed, scanning corners, exits, the ceiling. Emily closed the door behind them, sealing the night out. Inside, the place told its story quickly. Scrape marks on the floor. Pallets stacked for speed, not storage. Metal rings set into concrete, worn smooth by movement that wasn't machinery. Jack crouched, fingers brushing frost from one ring. Emily didn't need to ask. "People," she said. "Yes," Jack replied, and not briefly. Ranger moved again, urgency rising. He barked once at a smaller room in the back. Jack opened it. The space was barely big enough to stand in. Blankets refolded until they were nothing but creases. An empty water jug. The smell lingered, heavy and old. Fear that had soaked in and never left. Emily swallowed it down and stepped back out. "They held them here," she said. "Long enough." Ranger was already gone, pulling them toward a service corridor beneath the pier. The passage sloped down, damp and narrow, the sound of water grinding under ice growing louder. This wasn't searching anymore. This was a trail. They emerged near the far end, where fencing had been cut and badly repaired. Beyond it, a tight maze of stacked containers created blind pockets of shadow. Ranger slipped through without hesitation. Jack and Emily followed, shoulders scraping steel. On the other side, the snow was disturbed. One set of tracks. Careful. Alone. "Lucas," Emily said quietly. Ranger stopped, head snapping toward the rocks by the waterline. Jack saw movement, a shape separating itself from shadow. "Lucas," Jack called. "Calm. Even." "You're not alone anymore." The figure stepped forward. Lucas Hale looked thinner than he should have, 23 going on younger, his lean frame swallowed by layered clothes scavenged from docks and lockers. Dark hair curled out from under a knit cap. His face was pale, hollowed, eyes sharp despite exhaustion. He hadn't slept much. He hadn't stopped watching either. Ranger approached first. Slow. Neutral. Lucas dropped to one knee without thinking, hand extended. Ranger sniffed, then pressed his head briefly into Lucas's chest. Lucas exhaled hard, relief cracking through the tension. "You found me," he said, voice rough but steady. "You didn't make it hard," Jack replied. Emily stepped in, controlled, hands visible. "Lucas Hale, FBI, Emily Carter." Lucas gave a short, humorless laugh. "Yeah? Figures it'd take this long." Jack watched him closely. Lucas was scared, but not broken. This was a man who survived by noticing patterns. "They're still moving shipments," Lucas said, fast now, words spilling once the door opened. "Every night, same window, ships that don't exist on the system. They come in empty, leave full." "Full of what?" Emily asked. Lucas met her eyes. "People, mostly. They use the cold so no one looks too close." Jack glanced toward the black water beyond the pier. "How did you get out?" Lucas shrugged. "Storm knocked power. Confusion. I ran. Hid. Been moving since." Ranger stayed tight to him, body angled protectively, as if confirming the story in scent and posture. "They know you're gone," Emily said. Lucas nodded. "They're looking, but not tonight. The ship already left." That landed hard. Jack checked the horizon. Nothing but dark and ice. "You're sure?" "I hear them," Lucas said. "Engines. Same pattern. Same time. Every night." Emily took that in, fast, filing it where it mattered. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was confirmation. A distant siren cut through the air, far enough not to matter yet, close enough to remind them the clock was moving. Jack looked at Emily. She nodded once. They had proof. They had a witness. And the cold had carried them straight into the middle of something that wasn't finished. Morning broke hard and gray over the lake, the kind of daylight that offered no warmth and no comfort. Jack Morrison felt it the moment he stepped outside the safe house, the quiet cabin loaned by a retired harbor master who asked no questions. Ranger stood beside him, hackles half raised, reading the air with focused intensity. The cold still carried truth, but now it carried something else too. Attention. They had been seen. Emily Carter confirmed it before Jack finished his first sweep of the perimeter. She emerged from the cabin with her phone already in hand, auburn hair pulled back tighter than usual, jaw set. She looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from the weight of inevitability. The kind that came when a line was crossed and there was no stepping back. "My burner's compromised," she said. 2 minutes after I pinged a financial node last night, I got a call that wasn't meant to scare me. It was meant to remind me." Jack nodded once. He had expected this. Ranger shifted closer to Emily, placing himself between her and the tree line without instruction. Lucas Hale sat on the cabin steps, knees drawn up, arms wrapped tight around himself. He looked worse in daylight. Bruises showed along his wrists where restraints had once been. His eyes never stopped moving. 23 years old and already trained by fear to notice everything. Ranger checked him every few minutes, a quiet patrol that Lucas pretended not to need. "They followed me," Lucas said suddenly. "Last night. 2 vehicles. Didn't push. Just stayed where I could see them." Emily turned toward him. "You didn't run." Lucas shook his head. "Running makes noise." Jack watched him with a measured expression. Lucas wasn't a victim anymore. He was a liability, which meant he was a target. By noon, confirmation arrived. One of the warehouses Jack and Ranger had searched was already dark. Power cut, locks replaced. Snow swept clean in wide, careless arcs meant to erase memory rather than hide it. Someone was scrubbing fast. Emily traced it back through permits and emergency filings. The name surfaced with deliberate regularity. Robert Klein. Klein ran Klein Maritime Logistics, a regional shipping company with a spotless public image and deep charitable pockets. He was in his late 50s, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and permanently tanned in a way that spoke of controlled environments rather than sunlight. He favored tailored coats over suits, projecting approachability without weakness. His reputation was built on reliability and discretion. People trusted him because nothing ever went wrong around him, or so it seemed. Emily pulled up a photo. Klein smiling at a fundraiser, arm around a city councilman. Another of him standing on a dock, laughing with workers. "He's clean," she said. "Too clean. Every questionable route we flagged leads back to a shell that folds into his books." Lucas leaned forward. "He never shows up," he said. "But his people do, always the same ones." Jack looked at the screen. "He keeps records," he said, "which means he's not the top." Emily met his eyes. "Exactly." The threat escalated before dusk. A black sedan rolled past the cabin twice, slow enough to be deliberate. Emily's phone buzzed again, this time with a message that didn't bother hiding its intent. A warning wrapped in politeness. Step back. This doesn't end well. Lucas didn't get warnings. He got chased. They were halfway to a relocation point when it happened. A narrow road skirting the tree line, snow piled high on both sides. Ranger froze mid-step, ears snapping forward. Jack saw the headlights too late to stop. The truck came fast. No plates. No hesitation. "Move," Jack said. They split. Emily dragged Lucas off the road as Jack stepped into the open, arm raised. Ranger launched forward, not at the vehicle, but across its path, forcing the driver to swerve. The truck fishtailed, clipped a snowbank, and tore away into the trees. Silence followed, sharp and complete. Lucas was shaking now, adrenaline ripping through him. Emily kept a hand on his shoulder, steady and firm. "They're cleaning," she said, "and they're testing." Jack stared at the tracks already filling with snow. "They want us scared," he said. "That means we're close." That night, Klein made his move. Emily received an invitation, formal and unthreatening, to discuss a misunderstanding. A meeting request framed as cooperation. Klein wanted to help. He always did. Jack didn't like it. Ranger didn't either. The meeting took place in Klein's private office overlooking the harbor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, warm light, expensive restraint. Klein greeted them with a practiced smile, his voice smooth, his handshake firm but brief. He spoke like a man used to being believed. "This situation has become unpleasant," Klein said, "for everyone involved." Emily didn't sit. Jack did, Ranger at his feet, unmoving. "You're moving cargo off book," Emily said flatly. Klein sighed as if disappointed. "I manage logistics," he replied. "What's in the containers is not always my concern." Jack watched him carefully. Klein's eyes flicked to Ranger more than necessary. "You keep records," Jack said, "which means someone above you doesn't." Klein's smile faltered for half a second. Just enough. "I keep what I'm told to keep," Klein said. "And I erase what I'm told to erase." Emily stepped closer. "Who tells you?" Klein straightened. "You're asking the wrong questions." Jack stood. "No," he said, "we're asking the right ones too early." Klein's voice hardened. "You don't understand the scale of what you're interfering with." "I do," Jack said. "Enough to know you're the bookkeeper." Silence stretched between them. Klein leaned back, control slipping just slightly. "I protect operations," he said. "I don't run them." Emily turned away first. She had what she needed. Outside, the harbor lights reflected off black water like broken lines. Ranger exhaled slowly, tension easing, but not gone. "That wasn't the head," Lucas said quietly from the car. "No," Emily replied, "but it was the face." Jack looked out over the lake, already thinking ahead. Klein would fold if pressed, but whoever sat above him would not. The real threat was still invisible, and now it knew their names. The blizzard came in fast, swallowing the horizon and flattening sound until the world narrowed to wind, ice, and the low thrum of engines somewhere beyond sight. Jack Morrison stood at the edge of the service road with snow caking the shoulders of his OCP jacket, Ranger pressed close at his leg, muscles coiled and ready. Emily Carter adjusted the hood of her coat, eyes narrowed against the whiteout, breath measured. This was the window, the kind that erased mistakes and hid truth in equal measure. They moved when the lake groaned. The sound rolled through the storm like a warning, ice shifting under pressure, water speaking in a language older than ports and paper trails. Jack took it as a signal. Rangers surged forward, pulling them down toward the auxiliary dock where Klein's people had rerouted traffic for the night. The dock lights were dimmed, power rationed under the excuse of weather safety. A refrigerated vessel idled offshore, its silhouette a darker shadow in the storm, engines steady, patient. Emily kept the radio tight to her chest, volume low, listening for changes in cadence rather than words. She had learned that skill early after a mentor had been burned by a wiretap he trusted too much. Since then, Emily trusted patterns, not promises. She glanced once at Lucas Hale, who waited in the lee of a concrete wall with a borrowed parka hanging loose on his thin frame. He looked steadier now than he had days ago, eyes focused, jaw set. Fear still lived in him, but it no longer owned him. Ranger stopped at the water's edge, head lifting into the wind. He turned once, checking Jack, then pointed his body toward the vessel. No hesitation. Jack felt the shift in his chest that always came before action. He nodded and moved. They boarded low and quiet, timing the rise and fall of waves to mask sound. Jack went first, hands sure on frozen steel, Ranger following with practiced balance, nails clicking once before finding grip. Emily came last, her movements precise, economical. No wasted motion. On deck the cold was brutal, biting through layers, but the storm covered them, wrapping the ship in noise and blindness. The first hatch opened without protest. Inside, the temperature dropped further, refrigeration units humming like distant insects. The corridor smelled wrong. Clean, industrial, and threaded through with the unmistakable tang of human breath held too long. Ranger slowed, nose working, tail steady. He moved past stacked crates and sealed doors, choosing without doubt. They found the container amidships. Jack cut the lock. The door swung open a fraction, then stopped. A sound leaked out that did not belong to machinery. A muffled whimper. Emily's hand tightened at her side. Jack opened the door fully. Inside, people huddled in the dim, wrapped in emergency blankets that had never been meant to last this long. Faces pale, eyes wide. A woman near the front clutched a child to her chest, her hair streaked with gray far too early, her posture protective and fierce. She looked at Jack like a cornered animal, ready to fight or flee. Ranger stepped forward and sat, calm and solid, his presence cutting through panic. The child reached out without thinking, fingers brushing Ranger's fur, and the sound in the container shifted from fear to breath. "We're getting you out," Emily said, voice steady, carrying authority without threat. "Now." They moved fast. Jack guided, Emily counted and reassured. Ranger anchored the line, keeping bodies between steel and safety. The storm howled louder, the lake's voice rising and falling beneath them. By the time the last person was on deck, the ship's alarm screamed to life, a harsh, mechanical cry, swallowed almost instantly by wind. They didn't wait for pursuit. They didn't wait for confrontation. This was a cut and run, clean and narrow by design. Jack had learned long ago that sometimes the win was survival, not capture. They were gone before the crew could respond, slipping back into the storm as if the lake itself had hidden them. Hours later, in a borrowed maintenance building with generators humming and heaters rattling, the rescued sat wrapped in blankets, hands shaking as warmth returned. Emily worked the phones now, not to local channels, but to federal lines that couldn't be ignored anymore. She spoke in short sentences, facts only, no speculation. Evidence had been collected, containers logged, testimony recorded. The storm had done the rest. Lucas sat apart at first, then closer as Ranger circled and settled near him. His hand shook, not from cold, but from release. He watched the rescued talk quietly among themselves, watched Emily coordinate with controlled urgency, watched Jack lean against a wall, eyes closed for a moment, listening to the building breathe. "They'll say it was weather," Lucas said softly. "They always do," Emily replied without looking up. "This time it won't be enough." By dawn the storm broke. The lake lay quiet again, its surface a dull sheet of gray. No arrests had been made that night. No names had been dragged into the open. But the evidence was undeniable, and it traveled faster than fear once it reached the right desks. Lucas gave his statement slowly, carefully, every detail anchored to time and place. He described ships that never logged in, containers sealed differently, men who avoided cameras and spoke in codes. He spoke until his voice went hoarse and kept going. When he finished, Emily nodded once, respect clear in her eyes. "You did good," she said. Ranger lifted his head at the sound of her voice, then rested his chin back on his paws, satisfied. Jack stepped outside as the first federal vehicles arrived, their presence heavy and unmistakable, even without sirens. He watched the lake, remembering the sound it had made in the storm, the way it had carried them through. The night had spoken, and this time someone listened. Spring arrived quietly along Lake Superior, not with warmth, but with space. The ice retreated a little each day, cracking open lanes of dark water that reflected the sky without hurry. Jack Morrison noticed the change the way he noticed everything now, without urgency, without the constant edge that once kept him moving. He stood on the porch of a small lakeside building that had been a boathouse, long before it became anything else, a mug cooling in his hands. Ranger stretched at his feet with the patience of an old soldier who had learned when the fight was over. The investigation did not end with sirens or headlines. It ended the way most things did in the real world, slowly and in pieces. Federal teams came and went, paperwork stacked. Routes were closed one by one, not with spectacle, but with silence. Containers stopped moving. Ships that never existed were impounded without ceremony. People were returned to places that still felt unfamiliar, but were home nonetheless. It was not a victory that fit on a banner. It was the kind that only mattered to those who had been lost. Emily Carter visited when she could, which was less often than either of them admitted to wanting. She arrived without warning most times, her dark coat still sharp, her posture still precise. But something in her eyes had softened. The case had aged her, not in years, but in weight. She carried it well, as she always did, but Jack could see the cost. They walked the shoreline when she came, speaking about small things until the big ones needed air. "They'll never get them all," Emily said once, watching waves slap against rock. She said it without bitterness, just fact. "No," Jack replied, "but they'll get enough." Emily smiled at that. She had learned to measure success differently. Months of testimony had reshaped her work, pushing her deeper into the parts of the system that didn't tolerate shortcuts. She stayed because leaving would mean letting something rot again. Jack stayed because he finally understood what leaving always cost him. Lucas Hale stayed too, though not in the way he first imagined. He moved into a small rental near town, took a job with a local repair crew that didn't ask about his past. At 23, he carried more memory than most twice his age, but he carried it forward. He learned how to sleep again, how to eat without watching doors. He volunteered at the shelter on weekends, drawn back to the quiet presence of animals that did not demand explanations. Ranger approved of him. That seemed to matter more than anything. The boathouse changed slowly. Jack didn't plan it as a program at first. He just fixed what needed fixing, reinforced the floor, installed heaters that worked when the power didn't, cleared space. Word traveled the way it always did, through conversations and need. Veterans showed up, men and women with eyes too alert and hands that shook when they thought no one noticed. Some brought dogs. Some were brought by dogs who needed work as badly as their handlers needed purpose. Jack taught them without speeches how to read scent in cold air, how to trust silence, how to move together without pulling each other apart. Ranger watched from near the stove, gray creeping into his muzzle now, rising only when something truly mattered. He was older, slower, but still exact. He corrected Jack when Jack rushed. He reminded him when rest was allowed. On quiet nights, the cat from the docks appeared, older too, her once sharp movements softened by comfort. She slept by the window and tolerated Ranger's presence with dignity. Lucas named her Harbor again, as if some things deserved to remain unchanged. Emily left Lake Superior one last time before summer, called back to a new assignment that would take her south. She stood on the porch with Jack, the wind gentle now, the water almost kind. "You're really staying?" she said. "Yes," Jack answered. It was not a promise. It was a fact. She nodded, accepting it the way she accepted most truths. They did not say goodbye the way people expected. They said it the way people who understood distance always did, without drama, without pretending this was the end of something rather than a continuation. When she was gone, the lake settled again. Jack sat by the fire that night, Ranger curled close, the old dogs breathing steady and deep. The walls held warmth. The quiet held without pressing. For the first time in a long time, Jack did not feel the pull to move on. He had learned that staying was not the absence of motion. It was a decision, one that required as much courage as leaving ever had. Outside, the water shifted softly against the shore. Inside, there was a place worth staying. This story was never really about the lake, or the cold, or even the danger. It was about what happens when someone chooses not to walk away. In the darkest places, miracles rarely arrive as thunder or fire. Sometimes they come quietly, in the form of a man who stays when he could leave, in the form of a dog who refuses to stop searching, in the form of a stranger who speaks the truth even when it costs everything. God does not always remove the storm. Sometimes he sends a guide through it. The lake did not save those people by chance. The timing was not luck. The courage to act, the strength to endure, the instinct to protect life, even when no one is watching, these are not accidents. They are gifts, and gifts come with responsibility. In our daily lives, we face smaller storms, moments where silence is easier than truth, where walking away feels safer than staying. This story reminds us that choosing compassion, choosing courage, choosing to stand for others is how light enters the world. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope today. If it reminded you that faith still matters, leave a comment and write Amen. If you believe that even broken people can be used for good, subscribe and stay with us on this journey. May God bless you and your family. May He protect those who feel lost, strengthen those who feel tired, and guide every step taken in love and truth. And remember, miracles still happen. Sometimes they just walk on four legs beside someone brave enough to stay. Amen.